Hey everyone, welcome back. This is this week's episode of Authors Bantering. I'm Josh Breslin. This is Ian M. Rogers, and this is one of my favorite topics. And it's because I give this speech at least probably a couple times a year. So, um, those that don't know, I do take on here locally some writing clients as just someone I can basically tutor and offer some writing coaching to. And almost always I have to have a discussion with them at the very beginning about, are you a hobbyist or are you looking to become a professional writer? And the speech I give basically goes like this. It starts with an analogy. I say, if you want to go play basketball on the weekends, right, at the park, you want to go and just shoot some hoops because it relaxes you, that's awesome. But now you tell me you want to get into the NBA. These are going to be two separate conversations here, right? Because the person that wants to be the hobbyist, it's not a whole lot of work, right? If you want to be a hobbyist writer, it's not a whole lot you got to do. You just sit there at the keyboard, you type, you read a little bit here and there. You improve your skill a little bit because you're just playing around, right? But much like the person that wants to go to the NBA, who instead of being the hobbyist has to actually practice all the time, like every day, practice drills, for years and years and years in the hopes of getting to the big leagues. It's the same thing with being a professional writer. You have to have a mental shift where you are constantly practicing. And for writers, practicing is reading, and I'll put analyzing as part of reading, and writing. Those are the two things you got to do. It's very, very simple. It's cliched for a reason, right? That always write a lot, read a lot. That's the two main things. But if you're looking to become a professional, you need to do that. And I'm obviously the write everyday guy. I don't think you necessarily have to do it every single day, but it's got to be done deliberately. And that's the big difference, I think, when you're coming to the idea of, are you the hobbyist or the professional, and the difference in that. It's, for the most part, just a mental shift. I don't know about you, Ian, but that's at least my very broad summation of the difference between the two. We can get more into the nuance in a second, but yeah.
I think this is, I really like the basketball metaphor. I'm not a sports guy at all, but it's this idea between doing something because you want to go all the way with it and be the best with it and, do it to get paid for it and do it enough to, potentially, invest in the business aspects of it as well versus just, hey, I do this thing for fun. It brings me tremendous fulfillment. It helps me relax. I do it on the weekends, and that's what I like.
Yep.
And just being able to separate those two ways of looking at writing, I think, is so, so important. And being able to make a clear statement to yourself, a clear choice, like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this as a hobby, and it's going to bring me great fulfillment. I still want to be good at it, and I still want to be the best that I can be, and I want to share my
Yep.
writing with people, maybe, or maybe just write for yourself. That's fine too. Versus I want to go all the way with this, and
Yep.
I'm willing to, make the sacrifices, invest the time, certainly invest in getting the skills that are going to be necessary there. And I
Bingo.
think that when a writer does not make that choice and falls somewhere in the middle, there can be a lot of problems. It's the idea
Yeah.
that they're maybe pushing themselves harder than a hobbyist would,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not going all the way or doing really what it takes to really, really put themselves out there as a professional and develop the skills that are necessary to be a professional, or looking into the other avenues of writing that a professional would do. And again, business can be a four-letter word, but it's just in terms of how to put your work out there, understanding different types of publication, understanding marketing aspects, presenting yourself as
Yes.
an author, in this kind of way. If a writer is doing some of those things but not really going all the way with it, it can lead to a lot of frustration, a lot of lost time and energy, and maybe a lot of disillusion with the writing itself, which really brings them a lot of joy and they get really excited about, because writing as a hobby is great. I wrote as a hobby for a long time. It was really fulfilling and important to me to be able to do that. And I think a lot of people do too. And I think a lot of people don't want the professionalism aspects, the kind of, they see it as kind of trappings or just beyond them or just
Yeah.
too much time, or they have maybe other things that they want to focus on, especially if they have another professional career. And again, that's okay. And anybody who tells you it's not okay, like they're wrong. They're putting pressure
Yeah.
on you to do things that you don't want to do. And I think it's again, it just behooves every writer to look at those two different basketball metaphors and say, okay, which one do I want to do? Is this kind of what you're going for here when you make those speeches?
Yeah, exactly right. And it's just comes down to the mental shift. Like, do you want? And that's what it is. Like, are you going to seriously put some time, practice, and focus on it? But you've started hitting on the other side of it though, which there's more to it than just putting the effort in, and you're gonna hit at, which I think is good. There's more to it. If you're gonna take it professionally, you do have to start thinking like a business, and you do have to start making certain considerations that you might find are limiting to your quote unquote creativity. I've had to deal with myself. I've actually complained about it in my vlogs somewhat frequently. For example, what you're writing. If you're going to try to be professional, right, you do have to write stuff that's going to get published. That means some of the content you're writing may not work, whether it's, in my case right now, right, it's a bit of a taboo subject, right? I'm talking about, I won't go in here, but my short story collection is about a bit of a taboo subject. That's been a bit difficult getting published. It's about looking at things like word counts for short stories and for basically novels as well. It's about adhering to understand your tropes and your genre and knowing that well enough to follow along. It's playing by the rules until you're at a point where you have enough success that you can start breaking the rules and breaking some of the conventions there. It's being willing to kind of swallow that pride in the beginning, that sort of ambition that you think that you are beyond that. You think that your work is far better than what the rules are, right? You're so good you can break the rules. You have the that quote by Prince, right? A strong spirit defies all rules, or something like that. Is the quote? Yeah, you think you're like the person that's so good you can break it. And again, I felt that way many times. But in a very serious sense, if you're trying to take this seriously as a business, you do have to look at the way the business works and basically play ball, for that, lack of a better term. I think I've used like 3 cliched idioms so far. But
Yes,
yeah,
again, I really like that way of putting it. If somebody's listening to this and they're getting scared by that, I don't think it's maybe quite as dire, quite as dire as that. I think a lot of writers see this sort of dichotomy is I play by exactly all of my own rules, or over here I cater to the man and I write whatever's popular at the time, and I completely avoid my own whims and desires and do whatever they want to hear. And that is a false dichotomy. Please do not think of it that way. I think that there's plenty of room for professional writers to write about what feels important to them and what they want to write about and what they're good at writing about, and what channeling their genuine voice into a finished work that still, as Josh mentioned, plays by the rules, that still fits into a genre, a market, something that is sellable, something that people want to read, something that is palatable, something that makes people excited and is approachable.
Yeah.
This isn't a video about the conventions of genre or anything like that. But if you're seeing the business end as sort of I have to compromise and write whatever they want to tell me to, whatever comes out on the page is not going to be good. There's going to be no heart behind it. It's not going to be polished. It's going to come across as really false.
Agreed.
And I think the best professionals are able to channel that hobbyist mindset into producing writing that still works on a professional level. And that's what makes it really magical, is that it strikes the balance between them. On the other hand, if you are just a pure hobbyist and you want to completely write by your own rules without worrying about any of that stuff, again, a lot of good can come from that as well, and a lot of fun can come from that also.
Yep.
I think that a lot of that writing has trouble when you try to put it out into the professional sphere, but in terms of just the hobbyist mindset, that's where the magic happens, and that's really, really cool.
It is. Absolutely. And yeah, don't take what I said, right, I just said a minute ago, don't take it as like a hard and fast thing. Understand it's a scale. But be aware of it. But it's a scale. It's like in a video game where you have like an influence scale and you have like one person on this side, one person on the other, and as you do these missions, you gain influence with one, lose with the other. It's the same thing. You have like your creativity over here, and you have the business over here, right? And you have to kind of keep that sort of influence. Ideally, it'd be nice somewhere in the center, 50-50, but more likely not, you're going to make concessions one way or the other. but being aware of it going into it, and realizing that if you're going to sort of go against convention and go against these things, it's going to pose a challenge, and try to find ways to maybe subvert that, or try to maybe intertwine them if you can. But yeah, it's very much a granular scale there.
One thing I would add actually is that if somebody's not sure whether they're a hobbyist or a professional, or they feel as if they're somewhere in the middle, one really good test or a good question that you could ask yourself is, okay, do I write when the muse strikes, or am I
Yes.
willing to make writing a part of my regular routine?
Bingo. Yes, I
And I
completely
think a
agree.
lot
Yeah.
of people who are hobbyists, or who are hobbyists at heart, maybe they don't call themselves that, but their mindset is hobbyist, will write when the muse strikes them, when they feel like writing, when they're, in the mood, when they, have a free minute, when they're feeling bored, when whatever that means to them.
Yep.
And I think, 99.9% of professionals will make writing a part of that routine, in terms of both getting the pages filled out and doing everything else that is required to build a writing career. That real work, the kind of stuff that you talk about on your channel with self-publishing a book and all those steps that come into that. They make time for those steps, just as they would any other job or responsibility that's a part of their priority.
Exactly. Nope, I completely agree with you. It goes back to that Somerset Maugham quote of, I always write when the muse strikes. Fortunately, it strikes at 10 a.m. sharp every day. Yeah.
That's I have not heard that before.
Oh yeah.
Somerset Maugham, for readers who don't know, was one of the most prolific and popular authors of the early 20th century in Britain. A lot of his stuff didn't really make it over to America and hasn't had the longevity that it's had over in Britain.
Yep.
But like, Somerset Maugham produced books. Like, he was a professional writer of his time, and just no buts about it. I really, really like that quote.
Thanks. Yeah, and if you never read his stuff, just understand that quote is basically a professional versus a hobbyist, and it's funny you talk about, right when the muse strikes, right? That's often what, when I work with people, it's often what they talk about. That I'll ask them, like, I'll give them assignments. This just happened the past week. I gave an assignment where I said, for the next 2 weeks, we're not going to meet. Both of us are away for the next 2 weekends. So you have 2 weeks here. We have an outline now of this next short story you want to work on. We came up with an outline. I want you to write as much of this first draft as you can. And I come back and they've penned literally a page and a half. That's all they've done, is a page and a half. Like, almost nothing really. This is double spaced too. And I've asked them, what happened? They go, oh well, things kept right. And I've gone back to them and I've said, what is this, right? Like, in other words, are you looking at this as a hobbyist, as part of professional? Because if you are a hobbyist, I tell people often, like, I'm great, but if you're going to pay me like $40 an hour here, it's like if you're a hobbyist, maybe don't work with me, like, in the sense, I don't want to take your money for that. But the person's got some money, so they don't seem to mind. But but the same thing, I asked them, I'll go like, hey, do you, like, are you writing when you just feel like it, or do you do it when you have to? And they say, no, I often write like a day or two before I have to submit it. That's when I'll do it. And they're procrastinating constantly, and I'll talk
deadline
about
mentality. Yeah, either you're writing to a deadline or an exterior assignment, versus writing to finish a project or to fulfill a bigger goal or dream.
Exactly, and that's the problem. That's a mentality. It happens all the time. They always talk about, just I'm writing when I kind of feel like I didn't really feel like it. Something came up. But it always goes back to, I just was not in the mood to do it. I wasn't feeling up for it, and therefore I didn't write. And that mentality has to shift. It has to go away. You have to break it, and it takes. Yeah, I think it might take time. There are books on helping people with this, like Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art is probably the best example of that, to kind of break that mentality. But it has to be broken if you're going to take things professionally. If you're going to be a professional, you cannot. Not all of us can be George R. R. Martin and miss every single deadline for like years and years and still be big enough that we can do it. Like, he gets away with it because he's been prolific enough before that he can pull it off. Us, we can't do that. It's not possible, unfortunately. It's just no one's going to give us the time to get things done. Either you have to get things done by the deadline or not. And hitting a deadline is important.
Yes. One more thing I want to add to this, actually, this idea that we've been talking about kind of this dichotomy between
Yep.
professional and hobbies. And I think that I will say there is some room for, I guess, what I'll call a serious hobbyist, for
Yep.
lack of a better term, somebody who takes writing seriously as a hobby enough to have some sort of structure around their hobbyist writing.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be the hobbyist writer who does have a writing coach or has an editor, or the hobbyist writer who has a writing group that they are really, really dedicated to, and they write for that writing group and they're involved in that writing group, but then that's it. They don't go beyond that writing group. I think that is a middle ground that, again, is also okay, and I think a lot of people find fulfillment from that, and
Bingo.
enjoy the sense of community from that little writing group or from working with that one-on-one relationship, even to the point where they're willing to pay $40 an hour for it, for something like that. And again, that's okay too. I would put that in the same lump as someone who, for example, pays for archery lessons as a hobby and goes to an archery school, and is willing to pay and invest in archery equipment and classes and hang out with other archery people and do that in a very structured kind of way. They're not an archery professional, and they're not just messing around in their backyard, but they're serious enough about it to take that structure seriously. And again, that's okay. That I think would be kind of a middle ground between the two that some people watching might fall into.
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit like the weekend golfer that pays for golf lessons to improve their game, right? Like you're still you're not going professional, but you're still paying for it. I agree. It definitely is that element.
Golf is probably more common than archery. I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say when you mentioned that, I'm like, yeah, people do like weekend golf often do that. But yeah, like you might do that. Although even then though, right? You're putting you're practicing, right? You still have the element. You're not just taking a couple lessons and not doing it anymore, right? Someone hires, say a writing coach, something like that, basically, and they don't do the work or the exercises to get the benefit of it. It is a bit like going to like the golf, the golf instructor, practicing a couple times and then not ever going on the greens and teeing off again. But again, I don't go too much down this. This is a whole different subject, I suppose, for the future.
It's maybe a subject for another video. But I would argue that in that case, where if somebody has that structure of the writing group or the writing coaching or the working with an editor, and they're not putting forth the work to make that a fulfilling experience, maybe they're not even at a point where they want to do that. Maybe they should be back in the squarely hobby category. And again, that's perfectly okay for them to be doing that.
You'd be right. Some good topics there. I think we have more. I think there's actually more area to perhaps discuss in a future video. But I think for now, we've kind of hit on the main ideas. So with that, what we'll do is we'll sign off here. I'm Josh Bresslin. That's Ian M. Rogers. And we will see you all next week.
Take it easy.